All right, this is Chat UTD. I know it's the international break, but there's still stories doing the rounds on Man United as always, and I'm going to look particularly today at stories around the stadium, a particular article I want to go over with you, and also a slightly different perspective on the stadium from someone I spoke to last week, which I was going to share with you at some point anyway, so today seems as good a time as any. Briefly look at the fact that the Reading owner has been expelled from his position, and then look at the joint protest between the 1958 and FC United this coming weekend. Tomorrow will be 2 weeks since United announced plans for a new stadium. My response: if there'd have been even general upkeep of Old Trafford over the last 20 years, we wouldn't need a new stadium, and this is the final twist of the knife from the Glazers into the heart of Manchester United. And not only that, but they're going to benefit massively financially from a new stadium, which just sticks in my throat. So I read an article last week, but just went over it again today. So the subject of this article is someone called Stefan Borson, who's a financial advisor in football. He used to work for Man City. He talks about the fact that it's highly unlikely United are going to be able to build a stadium with 100,000 seats in it. That just doesn't really happen. There's a handful around the world, and he doesn't think that's possible. It's not feasible. And it's more likely to be 90,000, which will have a big impact on the club financially because their plans are, of course, for a 100,000 seat stadium. Right now, obviously, we've got 76,000, is it? So if it was 90,000, we'd have 14,000 more fans every week, which obviously is a big increase in matchday revenue, but not as much as it would be if it was 100,000 people there every other week. And I think with the big egos in the boardroom, they also want that kudos of saying we've got a stadium that holds 100,000 people. So that was interesting, but that's not the bit I'm going to just quote. The bit I'm going to quote is here. So Stefan Borson says, I would say right now people just need to be slightly cautious about too many predictions in respect to what will happen here. Until we've got a good steer as to what the plan is on how you fund a project like this, I think there are some big question marks. You might go, who the bloody hell is Stefan Borson? Yeah, good question. But I think it's a really valid question, no matter who he is. It's a good question. We're a club that's £1 billion in debt, the co-owner of which has said very recently that if he hadn't put a couple of £100 million in, we'd have gone bankrupt. They're making cuts left, right, and centre. We're having to pay loads of money on interest for the debt that we've got that isn't going anywhere. It hardly shouts out a club that's in a financial position to go and make a £2 billion commitment on a new stadium, does it? So I think it's a very valid question. Now, we could speculate, and we'll probably be right, as to how we're going to generate those funds. Naming rights for the stadium, private investors, more debt. Yeah, but that's never been made clear. So I think it's a genuine question. It's a legitimate question to ask. Let's not start getting too far ahead of ourselves with this stadium before you know how it's going to be funded. Bear in mind, you're a club that's £1 billion in debt already and in absolute financial dire straits, really, as it appears to be. And so Jim Ratcliffe has this knack of telling us how bad everything is and that we're close to the wall and we're having to make these cuts, and if we don't make these cuts, we'll go bankrupt. But then in the next breath tells you everything's going to be all right. Like, in the next few years, we're going to be debt free. In the next few years, we're going to be a prudent football club again. In the next few years, we're going to challenge at the top table of English and European football. In the next few years, we're going to have a £2 billion stadium that we're going to move into. The question that's never asked is how. How is that going to happen? And either he doesn't know the answer to that question and this is all just bullshit, or particularly pertaining to improvement financially, maybe we are going to improve financially, but it's going to be in a way that benefits Sir Jim and the Glazers, but not the fans and the club. Because if it was a financial improvement that benefited the fans and the club, believe me, he'd be talking about it. There's some fan channels that have gone a lot further than me. I'm just raising a question that's been brought up in an article, which I thought was a valid question. There's some fan channels that have sort of said, look, not having that this stadium's even going to happen, that images have been released of a stadium that probably won't even materialise, and that it's spin because there was protests the weekend before the announcement, there was the Sir Jim and the Gary Neville interview, and that the club again want to try and appease the fans. They're not really reading the room though, because certainly not appeased me in announcing a new stadium, but they've appeased a lot of people. So I don't know if that's true or not, but in terms of whether it's spin. But there are some genuine questions to be asked, I think, and because I've not looked at it with the lens that I'm giving you now, when I first looked at all the information that was out there nearly 2 weeks ago around the announcement of the new stadium, I missed this, but I looked again today, and United's announcement said Man United confirms ambition to build 100,000 seater stadium. Confirms ambition to. You might go, what are you getting involved in the semantics for here? Of course they're going to do it. But they didn't say that's definitely going to happen. They said it's an ambition to do that. And devil's in the detail. This doesn't end up happening, and people said, you told us this was going to happen. They could say, no, we told you we had an ambition to do that. It's very different. I don't want us to move into a new stadium, so maybe I'm just making it make sense, and maybe I'm putting 2 and 2 together to make 8 because of that. I'm aware that could be the case, but just a different perspective worth keeping in mind, I think. Continuing with the theme of the stadium with a slightly different hat on, I had a chat with a fella a week or so ago, a United fan, an architect, very successful fella, not anywhere near done the stuff of like Man United size, but from a family of structural engineers and architects, it's in his blood kind of thing. Very pragmatic, very logical. I don't want to misjudge him, but I would say not the most emotional Manchester United fan. I think just supports Man United, wants us to do well, but as I say, very pragmatic and very logical. He asked me, what do you think of the stadium? And I told him, and I said what I've said to you. If the Glazers hadn't neglected it so badly, we wouldn't need a new stadium. His opinion was really different. He said, from an architect's point of view, you can see why the canopy is a really good idea because we have so much rain in Manchester. He's listened to the architect who's designed it and likes a lot of his ideas. And he also said, look, in 20 or 30 years, we'd probably need a new stadium anyway, and the stadium isn't great at the moment. So it makes sense to take the opportunity to do it now rather than wait, and inevitably it has to be done in 20 or 30 years. And I sort of said, what do you mean by that? Why would it have to be done in 20 to 30 years? So he said, even if the stadium had been kept in reasonable condition, the fact is, he said, a stadium that old, more than 100 years old, he said, materials get old. Materials have a shelf life. And he said, and when you renovate a certain area of the stadium that has materials that are from that year, and then you renovate maybe 10 years later, you do another area of the stadium. He said, all the different materials are reaching their shelf life at different stages. And no matter how many times you renovate, at some point you're going to have to renovate again because those materials reach the end of their shelf life. And he said it just starts to be that with a stadium as big as Old Trafford, you're almost constantly going to have to be renovating small parts of it. And he said you end up throwing bad money after bad money after bad money. Where the cheaper option probably is to knock it down, get a brand new stadium that then probably doesn't need to have anything done to it for a long, long period of time. And I'd never looked at it like that before. So I said to him, well, I've always said that this would never happen at Anfield, but Anfield's an old stadium. So are you telling me that even though there's a part of Anfield that's been recently renovated, are you telling me that in 20 or 30 years Anfield will be knocked down? And he said, yeah, it will. Because even the part that's just been renovated, those materials at some point in however many years will get old. The cost of materials has gone through the roof. So there'll be another area of the stadium that needs to be repaired, renovated, made better soon anyway. And he said, and again, you're almost constantly going to certain parts and repairing and renovating, and it just costs loads of money because of the materials. The cheaper option is to knock it down and start again. Now, I've been brought up to question things, not just take things as read. And whilst he knows a lot more about this stuff than I do, I don't just take that as read. I don't just take that that's absolutely gospel truth. But it was an interesting perspective. My perspective still is that, okay, let's say what he's saying is true, and it would have to be knocked down in 20 to 30 years anyway. My perspective is that I love Old Trafford, and it's where I want Manchester United to play. And had there been general upkeep of the stadium for the last 20 years, then it wouldn't be in a bad condition, and it being knocked down would be in 20 or 30 years' time, in which case I'll be an old codger and I won't be that bothered about it, selfishly. But right now, I want us to play at Old Trafford. It tells me that the Glazers have known what they've been doing all along here, though, because we've always said just do some general upkeep. But general upkeep would cost them 50, 100 million quid every 5 years, wouldn't it, probably? And maybe more recently, because the cost of materials for this type of stuff has gone up significantly since COVID. So we know that even when it's club generated money, they're not going to put club generated money into the club, into the infrastructure, and for the benefit of the club. They're going to pocket it. So they don't want to spend any money. So they probably thought to themselves, we will just leave it. We'll just leave it to go to wreck and ruin, and then there'll be no option but to do a new stadium, because what's the point in spending 50 to 100 million quid and maybe more every 5-6 years, whatever it will be? That's money that can go in our pockets when in 20 or 30 years we don't need a new stadium anyway. That's probably what they've thought, if what the fellow I was talking to said is right. So maybe that was the plan all along, and then they're going to get a new stadium where, again, none of their money's going into it. They'll benefit massively financially from it, either because it'll generate a lot of money, or the club will go up significantly in worth because of the stadium, and they could sell it off for daft money if they ever sell it. But there's got to be a question ethically here as well. The Glazers put their family debt onto Manchester United. They've never paid a penny of it off. We paid £1 billion in interest on that debt over the last 20 years. Then someone's come along and given their family, for a stake in the club, £1.2 billion at a time when they've let the club rot and it's in financial trouble. But they've converted that club money into family money. So now we're in a position where the club's £1 billion in debt. As I say, we're paying astronomical interest on that debt every year, and we need £2 billion to build a new stadium, which they're going to benefit massively from. So are they now saying, we've got £1.2 billion here for a stake in the club, let's pay off some of the debt, or let's pay the interest, some of the interest off each year? We'll start doing that with the money we've just been given, or we're going to put some money into the infrastructure and some money into the cost of building the new stadium. Of course they're not. Of course they're not going to do that. They'll just put more debt on the club. So essentially, they've caused the problem in the first place. They've been rewarded for that, and then they won't use any of that reward to fix the problem that they caused in the first place. How's that okay? How's that ethically right? It brings me to the Reading owner. So I've tried to look into it, and I can't really get to the bottom of exactly why he's been expelled. But he's been expelled because he fails to reach the criteria of a fit and proper owner. Not in advance of him becoming the owner. He was already the owner of the football club. His feet were firmly under the table, and he has basically been told he cannot continue in that position. The EFL have expelled him from his position as owner of Reading Football Club. So it means it can be done, doesn't it? Now, we're not governed by the EFL. We're governed by the FA and the Premier League. But you can't tell me that anybody looking into the Glazers and what they've done over the years and what they're doing right now, as I just highlighted there, is fit and proper. It's not. But I suppose if you're looking to remove the Reading owner, with no disrespect intended to Reading, they're a relatively small club. It's probably a relatively easy thing to do. It'd probably be an absolute ball ache to try and do that at Man United, and it would be like the trial of the century, wouldn't it? And everything. Maybe it's just too big a thing to try to do. I don't know, but we have to have at least an argument to say someone could look at this. Maybe I'm wrong. And then finally, the 1958 and FC United are coming together for a joint protest ahead of FC United's game against Stockton at Broadhurst Park, their stadium, at the weekend. A little bit of background there, and I'm not trying to patronise anybody. I don't know who my audience is to some degree. So for those that don't know, FC United are a club that was created when the Glazers took over at Man United. There was a group of disgruntled Manchester United fans who could see what was coming and didn't want a part of it, so they created their own football club, FC United of Manchester. You can tell by the title, they are almost like a phoenix from the flame clubs, because what they would say is, our club's going to be killed by these people, so we're going to start again, and the essence of Manchester United will come with us. So they first started at Gig Lane in Bury, and they were getting 3,000 to 4,000 people. They were right in the bottom tier of English football. They had to start at the bottom, A lot of the songs were United songs, wore the same colours, the crest is very similar, etc. 20 years on, they are a self-sufficient football club. They're a fan-owned football club. They've got their own stadium now. Attendances are probably down to about 1 to 2,000. They are in the 7th tier of English football, so they've not moved significantly up the tiers that far. Their songs now are there are United songs in there, but there's a lot of them a lot of songs now are about FC United and what they've achieved over the years in creating their own club, and rightly they're pretty proud of that. Now there's been some conflicts and certainly a difference of opinion between Man United fans and FC United fans, and my understanding of this is from some Manchester United fans' perspective, what they would say is, you've left your football club, you've deserted us. You can't do that. There's one thing you can't do is change your football team. And you might have created something in the essence of Manchester United, but it isn't Man United. You've walked away from it, and you just can't do that. So that's what some Man United fans would say. Some FC United fans would say, you're staying and you're feeding the Glazers and you're complicit in all this. Like, grow a backbone and do something about it. I can see both sides of the argument. I support Man United. And I would go to FC United, as I have done with my lad a couple of times recently. But there's been a bit of friction there, let's put it that way. So the 58 and FC United have got together and essentially are saying, look, we want the same thing. We want the Glazers to leave Man United. Whether or not that would then mean FC United fans would go back to Old Trafford or not, I don't know. But they still would want the Glazers to leave United. And I read the FC United statement on their website about the protest, and they said, we have always said we want to be the first port of call for disillusioned Manchester United fans, or even Man United fans who want to come and experience something different. We want this to be your first port of call. And we essentially want United to be run better. Even though we've gone and created our own football club, we all would be happy if we could see that Manchester United was in the right hands and being run in a way that was best for the interest of that football club and our fans, and the fans. So there's a thawing and there's a healing of the wounds, I think, and I think it's clever on behalf of the 58. I said in a video a while ago, the difference between loud complaint and strategic protest for change is quite a big difference. But one of the criteria for actually having strategic protest for change is bringing together factions of a fan base. And as FC United, and I think 1958 said, FC United are a 20-year-long protest against the Glazers. They are a faction of the Manchester United fan base, some more than others, but they are. And there's definitely been a lot of conflict between the two clubs. So if you can bring that together, then at least one faction of a split fan base has been brought together, and there's safety in numbers, isn't there? There's, what's that expression? United we stand, divided we fall. The more we've got, the better chance we've got of doing something about this, even if it is lobbying government, FA, Premier League, etc. The fact the Reading owner has been expelled gives me ever so slight hope that something could happen. So I think it's a good idea, and that's Broadhurst Park in Moston, Manchester, on Saturday, 3:00 kickoff against Stockton. There's a joint protest being arranged. It's called the United Day, which was, I think, arranged anyway by FC United, where it's celebrating the duality of the two entities coming together, but they're using this as an opportunity to do a protest, loud complaint, I might call it. So I think it'd be well attended. The ground holds 4,400. As I said, I think the average attendance is between 1,000 and 2,000, so I imagine that'll be inflated at the weekend. So I was going to go down anyway, just to watch the game with my lads. So I think, all being well, I'll be down there. Interesting for me personally, FC United's not been on my radar really at all, and then I've taken my lad a couple of times recently, and then this has come up where the 1958 have got involved as well. So it's interesting, and hopefully those two factions, if you like, can come together, and that's only one small part of the fan base, but the more we can be together, the better. Just to summarise then today, I think valid questions have to be asked about where this is being funded, the stadium. you have to look at the ethics of it for me, that the owners are sat on £1.2 billion, but they're putting none of it in, and it's going to load the club with more debt. Do we have an argument to take to the FA, the Premier League, the government, given that the Reading owner has been expelled? And finally, obviously FC United and 1958 coming together is a really positive thing. Glazers out.